So I'd like to welcome you to the Unmasked Relationship Factor Series. I am AliNICOLE WOW, also known as Majesty, and I am joined once again by my great colleague and also one of my celebrity-preneurs, Rob Deptford. And I'm excited to have him returning to the space because we had such a phenomenal conversation last time, and being able to bring some empowerment. And also, I just want to mention, because Rob and I, we work together so many different capacities or so many different levels. And I mentioned that the last time that he was here, and I'm also the vice president for one of his companies. And there's robust information within the description about that and different opportunities that you can take advantage of that will certainly help you in many ways as it relates to relationship dynamics on so many different levels, whether it's with life, business, or leadership, and just so much more. So Rob, thank you again for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I look forward to these things always, and sometimes I don't know what the topic is going to be, as is the case today. But we'll see. We come up with good
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. And that's the thing about this particular series, is that there's never a set agenda in terms of a topic. We come together and see what comes up, but the overall primary objective is to be able to provide empowerment for
Yeah.
others as it relates to the relationship dynamics. And one of the things that we do within these particular segments for the series is unmasking some of the uncommon talked about areas within relationships. And then even if we are hitting on some that are common, we try to go at it from a different angle and see if we can extract more value out of a topic and bring higher awareness to it. So excited to see where this is going to go today.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, on the note of where this could potentially go, off the top, is there anything that comes to mind for you in terms of something you think is not talked about as often, or it's not as common, that we can unmask today? I know we got into some different dynamics in our last conversation, and it turned out really well in terms of making it work and unmasking the things that can make relationships work better. So what you got? Or should I take the lead?
Well, I mean, we could go in a number of different directions here,
Yeah,
right?
so
But
let's see where we go. What's
yeah.
jumping out to you now?
Well, I mean, I've got a few things, but if you've got some things you want to steer towards, that's fine too. One conversation that comes to mind for
Mhm.
me that I've had, I think, with a couple of different people just in the last several days, couple of weeks maybe, is and this kind of stems from I mentioned in one of the other programs we did that my wife and I had our 19-year anniversary recently,
Yes, right.
and we've had some conversations about, this is getting to be a little bit more unusual, and how do you guys kind of do this and make it work?
Mhm,
And there's this idea of, it's not all like it looks on TV or in the movies. It's
mhm.
really, it comes down to, we have figured out how to put up with each other's BS. Right?
Basically.
And this is, I think this is something that a lot of, in terms of relationships, a lot of people don't necessarily wrap their heads around, because of the
Right.
piece that's glorified in the media,
Mm,
on TV and in the movies. So, um, yes, there are tremendously good times,
mhm.
but there are some challenging times as well. And you
Right.
really do have to be of the mindset of, okay, like there's going to be some really difficult things, and it's up to me to figure out how am I going to get through, to the other side of this. So,
Absolutely.
so that's kind of where we boiled it down to, was, yeah, we've figured out how to put up with each other's BS.
That's right. And you know what? I think there's a different vibration too, um, as it relates to putting up versus tolerating, which I know they seem synonymous in a sense,
Yeah,
but I think, putting up is definitely we're working together that person has their quirks, I have mine, and we are making it work. So we're not just really tolerating each other. We put up because we love each other. We're putting up, putting up with each other, so to speak. But but it's all a part
Exactly.
of, yeah, it's all part of the process. And on the note of what you talked about in terms of the glorification, when people see what seems to be these grand outcomes or expressions of love that they see, and not understanding what it takes to actually have um, those unique type of relationships. And so something that I actually touch on in some of my work around relationship metamorphosis is that when you do see relationships that are very solid and they seem to be very grounded and harmonious, most of the time those relationships have undergone a metamorphosis. And so, we'll just use metaphorically the transition of a caterpillar into a butterfly, where when people see the butterfly, that's the glorified state, right?
Yeah.
However, they don't realize that the process that had to be well, the process that the caterpillar had to go through in order to become the butterfly. So they see the glory of the butterfly, but they don't understand that there was a journey, a very hard journey, to actually come into that formation. And so when people look at relationships and they look, oh, this person, that couple seems to really have it together, they don't realize that sometimes there has been that transition of metamorphosis. Sometimes people have gone through some hard times in order to get to that more glorified state, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and these are the just some discussions that I've had in the last couple of weeks, as I say. So that
Mhm.
was what came to mind off the top of my head. But I don't know. You may have had another topic you wanted to.
Well, no, there's never, like I said, no planned agenda. I think that this was perfect. I think that, we can actually talk about this because uh, to me, that's very important. Um, Another thing on the note of that is that people a lot of times like to make comparisons to different relationship, dynamics, and each relationship is unique, as you know. Each
Yeah,
each relationship is unique. Now, there are some core fundamentals that are going to apply across the board for sure. Love, honor, and respect,
yeah.
appreciation, just different things, and communication that's going to make relationships not just work, but last. And that's important because it's the short, mid, and long game, the long term um, game of the relationship. You agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It does take work. You have to put the effort in and day out, and it gets different as the relationship evolves.
Oh, absolutely. And that's part of the metamorphosis, is that it's not just transformational, it's very evolutional, because it's an evolutionary journey. And how relationships start off sometimes are not always how they, pan out, a certain way, because there is the growth and there's the change, but have to be willing to uh, be there for it all, right?
You do, and yeah, and I think there is maybe we have fewer examples
I
of that
agree.
transition now.
I
Maybe
agree.
that's part of it. Because I know, like, we're lucky. My wife and I,
Mhm.
both of our parents are still here, thankfully,
Yes, yes.
and both have been married for more than 50 years.
Wow.
So they're part of our lives and a big example in our lives, of
Right,
course.
right,
But I don't know that we see much of that outside of our own circle.
right,
Um,
right.
so and I think it's maybe it used to be more common.
It used to be, yes.
And so things are shifting in society in general, and some of it is understandable. There are good reasons for
Yeah,
things not to be the same as they were, uh,
right, right.
depending on the dynamics in different cultures and different societies and things. There is some positive evolution happening for sure,
Absolutely. And
but I,
on that note, I actually do some trainings around this, have some even on YouTube, in terms of relationships that evolve together, or the ones that typically stay together. There's this common theme, primarily in the Christian community, so to speak, of families who pray together, stay together. And and I agree with that to a certain extent. It takes more than just the act of, the intention of prayer, so to speak. People have to be growing and evolving together, because when they don't actually grow and evolve together, then that's where the disconnect comes. If one person is on a growth path and is continuing to increase in who they are, that changes the dynamics. And if another person decides, well, that's not for me, I'm not going to do that, well, that's fine, but that could change some things, especially if the progression is for the better. So I know that's a whole nother topic, too,
Yeah.
but it is part of um, why relationships actually don't go to the next level, or why a lot of them fail. And so when you mention about your parents and your in-laws, and what we don't commonly see in today's relationship frameworks from an example perspective, is because a lot of times people are not evolving together. They're not growing together, growing more in love. They're growing more apart for various reasons.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that is important, is, when we make commitments, and though it's for better or for worse, but we have to understand that some of those dynamics are a little bit conditional too, because
Sure.
the worst can't be too worse, right? um,
Right. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, there are some circumstances where things just can't stay the way they just can't
right,
stick, right? It's just not reasonable to expect that.
right,
Um,
right.
but I also think there are circumstances where a little bit of a different effort or a different angle would change things.
Absolutely.
So I think, like if my wife came to me and said, I'd really like to try skydiving. I'm really interested in this. Well, I'm terrified of heights. I would never in a million years go
Right,
skydiving.
right, right.
So I'm not going to say, this isn't going to be something that I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to do this with you. Right?
No,
I'm going to
no,
get
no.
on board and I'm going to,
I support
let's,
you, but I'm not
yeah,
doing
like let's
it.
team up and do this. Not a chance. I'm not getting up in that
Exactly.
airplane.
Right, right.
But I'm not gonna. I'm gonna find another way to show my support for that.
Support. Right, right.
Um, so it's just thinking about coming at it from a different angle, right? So yes,
Mhm.
you want to skydive? Okay, well, all right. I'll show up for you and I'll support you and I'll
That's
be there on
right.
the ground when you safely land there,
Right,
right?
right, right.
And maybe I'll take the photos and stuff, but
Yes, yes. So, but we both can't do this, we have to think
yeah,
about the kids,
yeah, right,
Just in
right.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think, maybe that's a bit of an extreme example, but
No, I think it
there
was
are lots of
perfect.
things where people grow and develop interests in other things, and maybe it's not in alignment with what your spouse or your partner thinks is a good idea. But are there ways to look at it differently? Are there other angles
Absolutely.
where there can still be a mutual investment in that?
Oh, absolutely. There's always the opportunity for uncommon alternatives to come into play. And that's what most have to start looking for, are the alternatives to just doing it one specific way and just supporting one specific way. And also the communication factor, where the other party understands that, yes, I am providing support. This is the best way that I know how, considering, the dynamics. And so that's the fun thing about relationships and the growth spurts and everything that goes on, is that you get to be creative. You get to look at things differently. You get to learn more about yourself, and then what you can learn from the other person's vantage point, that even if you don't agree or feel aligned for certain things, how do you actually how you make that work,
Yeah.
um, and looking at the alternative ways, like you said, looking at something from a different angle, and and just saying, yeah. But those are the things that really keep relationships, I believe, on fire and continuing to grow, is when there are some of the differences and some of the things that maybe one is not as comfortable with, but at the same time, those are different levels of the growing and evolving together, so to speak, than versus someone who just decides, I'm not doing anything in life, I'm done with life, and the other person is still trying to, enjoy life and grow, evolve, and expand that way. I believe when couples don't evolve together in terms of their purpose, then that's where things get fragmented and
Yeah.
disconnections, start to happen. So yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think yeah, I mean, and I think people have to recognize that it's not going to be the same as when you were um, you know, young and getting
Right, right,
started.
right.
And it's a different experience as you progress.
Right, right,
Um,
right. And
and
sometimes it can be better, and sometimes it is just, well, hey, we're still here. We're still hanging on, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, hey, I'll tell you, my 90-year-old grandmother, she just turned 90 here
wow.
earlier this month, and my grandfather, who's just a few years older than she is, that's kind of where they're at. Is like, man, we're still here, and we're still happy to be here, and
Right. Yes,
and
right.
life has treated them pretty well. So,
Oh,
uh,
yes, to be
uh,
here yes, at that age and together, absolutely.
yeah,
Life has really treated them well. That's a
and
blessing.
still
Sure.
independent, right? Like
Oh,
that's
that's incredible.
unbelievable to be at that stage of life and still be able to. Although I'll admit my grandfather is, if they were not together, he would have some challenges for sure. But because they're able to be together,
Yes,
they can depend on each other and
right.
still be independent. So,
I have to throw a side joke in here. Well, like most men, if they didn't have their wives, where would they be? You know.
right. Exactly. He tells me every time I talk to him, he says, I stay out of trouble by doing the dishes. I just
Oh,
do the
yes, exactly. Yes, yes. And as you're told, that's right.
yes, yeah.
Ah,
For
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
that's so beautiful. Now wow, you have stellar examples in terms of those relationship dynamics. Grandparents who have been together that long, your parents, and then your in-laws too. I mean, those are phenomenal examples. That's right.
Yeah.
You have a high standard to live up to, don't you?
The
Here.
bar's been
Yeah,
set. I know it's
exactly.
yeah, this is it, right? And so is there some pressure to live up to that? Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, just a little.
Maybe a little bit, but I mean, again, it's all part of the process, right?
It
And
really is.
you have to
Yes.
put the work in, and it helps to have something to strive for sure.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because without having some type of marker, in a sense, then it's hard to really have a solid vision for what's possible. But when you do have those examples, before you, and even though each relationship is different, it's just the simple fact that, wow, this is very much achievable. Now, with this being achievable, that means that there are things that have to be done in order for this to not just maintain, sustain, but thrive to the next level and really evolve to the next level. It goes back to the relationship metamorphosis aspect, is that we start off in this state, which can be a great state, but when the evolution comes, what do we become to be something completely different as time progresses? So I think it's a beautiful experience when people can have the contrasting dynamics or different things that they kind of have to work through, in a sense, because
Yeah,
then it just takes them into more of that butterfly state, than just to be doing the status quo type of relationship, you know,
yeah,
activities, as you say.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that comes in different packages too.
Yes, it does. It
You
does.
know, I mean, we talk about the institution of marriage because that's how we were brought up. But I mean,
Yes.
that's things are different these days,
Oh,
right?
yes, they
We
are.
talk about, I wonder if our kids will ever be married. Like, is there, the way things have evolved and
Yeah,
shifted
right, right. Would
with,
they even want that, you know? But
do
then,
they want it, right?
yeah. But
With,
now with your kids, it's probably going to be different because they're looking like, ooh, well, mom and dad seem to have, made it, this far. And it's like, now I don't even know how mom has put up with dad this long, but she's done it. So that's remarkable,
yes,
You know?
exactly. And
Yeah,
it's
it
truly
kind of vice
remarkable when I
versa.
think about it.
Oh, the comedy of relationship dynamics. I think it's important to actually to have those because I think we each look back on certain things that we have said or we've done or however, and it's like, wow, that was actually a comical moment. What was I thinking? Um,
Yeah. No, the way it works for us usually is I don't remember any of that stuff, but my wife will bring it up.
oh, of course. Oh, yes, right. Yeah, exactly.
And just at
Because
the right time too.
oh, yeah, oh, absolutely. You have to be strategic with positioning that. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely, especially those who have the selective memory when women, our memories are like, we're like elephants. Now we don't forget.
Yeah.
And
That's
like
a fact.
exactly. It's like you don't remember this, but here's how it happened.
Yeah.
And word for word at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I have no clue.
Like, I don't even remember any of that.
Yeah. So I just have to nod. And
Oh, yes, that's the
yeah.
best thing to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
um,
It's so fun in terms of like I love this level of work um because it is in not the trenches of things, but it just is in the overall process of relationship development and progression. And this is so expansive because it's more than just about relationships in terms of marriage and couples, as we know, work related relationships, just different relationships that you have with people, in general. Just like we were talking in the last segment that we did together, in terms of even our own work relationship and colleague relationship, which I think is phenomenal. I think it's a really great connection. I have a lot of fun within the dynamics that we have together as
mhm.
colleagues and submitting to each other's leadership and co-facilitating things together.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, likewise. I mean, that's and the workplace is a little different environment for sure.
Oh, yes, it is.
Um,
That's right. And don't have to see you after 5.
right, right.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
whatever it happens to
Whatever
be.
it
Well,
is,
yeah.
right, exactly, right, or consistently, right. So I know, so it is different, but I guess my overall point is that relationships, no matter what types of relationships they are, they all have their different dynamics.
Yeah.
And we each seek to continue to have, harmony and to be as much aligned as possible and on that level ground. And if there is ever misunderstandings, then the good thing about being able to talk about those things and to have the communication, is important, for sure. We shoot ideas off of each other all the time. And if one's like, I don't like that, then it just, it is what it is. And we just find a way kind of to make it work. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, the communication piece is so important.
it is very much
Um,
so. Hmm.
and that's probably one of the challenges too for people as I think about it, right? Like if
Hmm.
if you've got something going on that you have a challenge with and you don't you just kind of let it stew and you don't say anything, and I mean it just gets worse if you
Oh,
as
it
time
does.
go
You
by.
have to actually, you have to speak up, are you familiar with Robin Sharma? Is it Robin Sharma? Motivational speaker and
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So he has these four tactics around, communication, and one of them is in terms of being able to speak up and to articulate. But of course, just it's just the way that you do it. It's okay to
Mhm.
vocalize. It's just the way that you do it respectfully. very tactfully. But it's important not to sit on things and not to let things stew, in a sense, especially relationship dynamics, is have the communication and state your part or how you feel, but of course being detached in a sense from how the other person is going to respond to that, just as long as you know that you've done your part. But don't sit on something and become a grenade and blow up at the wrong time. It's like, state what it is and do it in the most respectful and tactful way, because at least you have put it out there. And just say, I think it was an example or so, and this is big for me because I'm a stickler for time. But there was an example I think that he used in one of his talks where he was talking about, let's say, for instance, that if someone is late or chronically late or so, and you all have agreed to be at a restaurant and they show up at a certain time, and instead of just saying you were late and what was with you, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z, why weren't you here, or didn't you call or something, it says you can just state that, listen, I know your time is valuable, my time is valuable as well, can we agree to meet at the time that we said, or be respectful to let someone know whether something's come up or not. But again, it's in the way of the delivery, the way that you do it. And so it's really important in whatever relationship dynamics there are, is that communication factor is always going to be the chief cornerstone. It's always going to be key, but it is always going to be in terms of the delivery, with that. Now, are there times where sometimes you do need to be a little rough around the edges? Sometimes that could be a possibility, but I think that should be kind of a last resort.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that should not also be because there's so much buildup of escalation. It's much like with your children. If you've said, clean up your room, and you've already stated that that's what needs to be done, and they're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then they keep putting it off and they keep putting it off, and you've reminded them to do that, and they can keep putting it off. Now, okay, if I have to say the third or fourth time, now you're dealing with the different dynamics of me here. There may be consequences here, and it may come in the term of not as nicely vocalized as before. So I do think that there are times that you do have to use a different format of yourself, but even within that, it's still, the delivery of that still needs to be, in a very profound yet respectful way.
Yeah. And I think too, we have to recognize that there are other perspectives. So I
Yes, absolutely.
remember with the timing example, society uses time as a currency, and
Oh,
we run our
absolutely.
lives based
I
on the
definitely
clock.
do. Right.
But not everybody has that built into them. And I remember somewhere
Yes,
along the way
that's
going
true.
through some kind of corporate training or something where the facilitator talked about, there's people that are really value being time bound, having that as a parameter. But there's people that don't move on time. There's people who move rather, instead of time, they make decisions based on when the space feels right.
Yes,
It's about
yes,
how
yes.
the space, the environment, how things. So
Mhm.
it's not, the clock says 6 o'clock, it's time to go. Doesn't quite feel like it's
It
time to
doesn't
go
quite
yet.
feel, yeah. And you do need to be in sync,
Yeah.
in flow with the dynamics of life. I believe, in terms of the timing thing, because I'm very flexible in that area too, because I think that there are times where just because it needs to be set in stone this way, maybe that's not really the right timing for it. We've even talked about that even with
Yeah.
meeting times and different things like that. It's like, well, no, maybe it needs to be this way,
Yeah.
but I think in terms of when there's been, um, you know, certain agreements, and if something is like consistent and chronic, then that could be run into a problem, because like
Right.
we are practicing for football or just whatever sports, and the game starts at this time, and well, I wasn't really feeling like, well, your behind's going to be on the bench, you're not going
For
to be
sure.
playing with
Yeah.
us during this time. So I think that there, again, relationship dynamics and communication, and the understanding that yes, there are different perspectives, right, for sure, and they
Yeah.
each should be honored. But there's a time and a place for everything. So
Yes.
when there's a time where the band is ready to play and the symphony is ready and there's a recital going, that's not the time for then that quote unquote perspective of value to kick in and say, well, but I really wasn't quite feeling like, X, Y, and Z. Well, not when there was
Yeah.
a team effort
Yeah.
where people are dependent upon you for a certain role or a certain part that we have collectively agreed on.
Right.
So there's different things where, in terms of like an open mall, where the mall is going to be open from 9 to 9, and it's like, okay, well, I said I was going to go at 11, but something didn't feel right, so I'm going to go around 3 or 5, and potentially I could have missed getting into an accident or getting to, because it was the right time to go then. But if we've agreed to meet someone, then it is important, no matter what our perspective is around that, is to honor their perspective too, and the agreement to say, I'm not going to be able to make it or something, or don't just leave them hanging and
Yes.
them wondering. So yeah, so those are just the different dynamics. But again, all of this is a beautiful part of the experience of each person learning and growing, um, to build different levels of character, within the experience. So
And it's in making those agreements in advance where you have that discussion about, well, what's going to work? Well,
right.
what works for me is I need a set time. Okay. Well, what would be a time that would feel good for you?
Yeah, right.
And then let's bring that together, and kind of come to that agreement. And then, plans can change
Oh,
and
absolutely. And we need to
carry
be
on that
flexible.
communication, but at least you come together with those two different perspectives and put something together that works for everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing about it, again, that's the beauty of it, of being able to work through or come to those agreements, so to speak, so that there is the clarity, and then there's the harmony. And so I think that that's really important. I'm glad we've had this conversation, because it's really important for people to understand that, yes, though each person can have their perspective around it, but like anything, we have to know when to integrate or interject these different perspectives, because they don't always apply across the board for every scenario. But also, we all need growth too. The person who's a very stickler for time sometimes needs to be put with people who aren't on time, so they can also learn different time dynamics, and vice versa. People
Yeah.
who are chronically late need to sometimes be put with people who are very much a stickler for time, because it just helps, I believe, just both to learn that we don't just live in our own worlds, but if we're going to coexist together, then we do have to find a way to be respectful and honorable of, yeah, of those dynamics, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you and I, coming from journalism backgrounds, I mean, it
Yes.
was drilled into us that the news doesn't start at 6:01, right? It
Oh,
starts at 6 o'clock. So,
exactly. Right, right,
no,
right,
no,
right.
we got pretty good at being down to the second, and
We
now I'm
really
guilty of
did. That's
squeezing
right.
too much in, I think, into the time I have. So
That's
you
right.
know, I do end up at 6:01 sometimes, or
Yeah,
6:02
that's
even,
right. Oh, and
but
it's easy to do. Just like I
yeah,
remember in training when they were saying that a 30-minute show, no, it ends at what, 29 30 or something, or even before.
got to be time for the commercial break,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It has to be, right. And so again, that's the thing, is that when we are dealing in someone else's realm or so, then there are certain rules that you kind of have to play by. And sometimes in
Yeah.
relationships, we do have a few compromises that, we have to make, every now and again, for sure. All right. Well, we're going to be bringing this segment here to a close. It's been great having you back in this space because I believe everything that you bring up is tremendously valuable and so helpful. And you are refreshing for sure. And I know for many people that you are in terms of just the background with your grandparents and your parents, and then you being, in your marriage relationship for 19 years and raising two wonderful boys and a boss pet, yeah, so that's a shining example that others can look up to, appreciate, and set higher goals and know, hey, it's still possible in this day and age for sure. So I just want to thank you for being here again and unmasking, more of these relationship dynamics. Do you have one wrap up phrase or empowerment call to action that you would like to offer the listening audience?
Well, I think people still just have to do what's right for them.
Yes.
And maybe we do set an example. I don't know that we strive to necessarily, but like we said, we're following our examples, and
Right, right, right. Well, just
um,
know that you are, though. You that's something for you to think
right.
about. You are providing a stellar example of what's
Well, so yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, but yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest lesson for me has been that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right?
right, right,
Just
right.
isn't,
That's what makes it even more incredible, the fact that it isn't and it still is.
and you can't just give up when the sunshine and rainbows aren't there.
Right,
You have to think about, okay, how am I getting over that next hurdle?
right, right,
And
right.
I think probably thinking about those alternative angles at
Yeah.
carrying things on, that's probably a big thing to consider and implement as a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. That was tremendous too, and I agree wholeheartedly. So we're going to bring this segment to a close, and I just want to say that in closing, in terms of what Rob said about jumping over hurdles, when you think about a hurdle racer, obstacles are put there for a reason for them to jump over and build endurance. So sometimes relationship dynamics are like that too. So anything that comes up, just look, it's not an obstacle, it's an opportunity for growth and evolution. All right, so bringing this to a close, unmasking things again, and you all stay blessed, and we'll be back with you soon.